Hello, friends, and welcome to Your Daily Detroit. This is a Friday edition of the podcast, sharing what to know and where to go in Southeast Michigan. This is episode 1001 of the podcast for Friday, June 10th, 2022. From east of Woodward, I'm Jer Stays.
And from west of Woodward, I'm Devon O'Reilly.
It's good to hear from you.
Good to hear from you, Jer, coming off of the craziness, the pageantry, the revelry that is the Mackinac Policy Conference. It feels really good to be back in Detroit area.
Yeah, for sure. And you know what helps me get back into that? I tried something different for a drink. I went chain this time.
Okay, that's usually not you, Jer. What chain is your, go-to?
Because I have the familial roots. My father was born in Canada. I have sometimes an affection for Tim Hortons.
Okay.
So I actually got in a line. This was a line around the block at this Tim's location for the Beebs Brew.
Okay. The Beebs Brew, as Justin Bieber, as we were talking about here. The Beebs.
I got the notification. I got the press release, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to try it. I'm going to do this. It is a custom designed, apparently with Justin Bieber, cold brew, vanilla cold brew, with a pack of Beebs bits, which are Timbits that are like Bieber selected flavors. And those flavors include chocolate white fudge, sour cream chocolate chip, and birthday cake waffle.
I assume those are favorites of the Beebs himself. What a great mashup. Since he's such a big-time Canadian export, having the mashup between Bieber and Tim Hortons seems just perfect.
And apparently the other day he canceled a concert because he was sick, and people threw Tim Biebs at him or at the van or something.
Oh, no.
It's hilarious. Poor Biebs.
So it's good. You like it?
You want the good or the bad first?
I always like the bad first, and then just...
Okay, so this is a particular thing to me. I did not like the vanilla cold brew, and let me tell you why, and maybe that will help dial in if you will like it. It's that kind of fake vanilla, like the creamer vanilla, like you get out of the store that isn't actually like cream, which gives it a little bit of an aftertaste or whatever. It is not my jam. I know lots of people who love it. I understand and have been called a hipster because it's not my favorite. And I would usually put in just half and half with some vanilla syrup. But that is, the cold brew was solid. The cold brew coffee part itself was solid. The addition of the vanilla, just not my jam. And that's why. Some people will love it. It's not my jam.
Okay. Yeah, honestly, I drink pretty much my cold brew exclusively black. I don't like a lot of sweetness there, so this would be too much for me, I think.
Okay. And now the good, oh man, those Tim Biebs. Listen. Birthday cake waffle.
Is that the winner?
Oh, yeah. Every one of them was a winner. I got the 10 of them, and I was just into that box. It devoured it because that was the Tims that I know and love. So I feel like I am going to get the Tim Biebs in the future, but then I'll pair with my usual more slushy-ish coffee kind of iced coffee drink. So split decision on this one. And no, we are not sponsored by Tim Hortons.
No, we are not, and we didn't. I think you were fair to them, Jer. But there is a Tim Hortons just about everywhere now. I feel like they're proliferating as fast as Starbucks used to. So if you do want these, the Beebs Brew and the different Timbits, you can probably find it pretty close to you.
Actually, if you want, you could go on Belle Isle with your Beebs bits.
Oh.
You could sit and look at the skyline because there's a Tim Hortons right there at Jefferson and East Grand.
Great idea for a weekend like this. Supposed to be nice.
What do you got?
Well, Jer, I wanted to go a little, appropriate for today, as we've got a big event at the Congregation, which is a favorite spot of mine, a favorite spot of yours, a favorite spot of Daily Detroit, and they actually have a particular drink that is non-alcoholic, so nice for a pre-noon. It's called the Soda de Trois. So follow me here. We got sparkling water, house-made lavender syrup, half and half, a reishi tea, and then finally a butterfly pea flower powder.
I don't even know what that is, but I'm willing to try it. So what color is this?
Basically, I think the lavender kind of dominates, and I don't know if the pea flower helps at all. It almost turns it into a purple in pictures, but it actually comes off as almost like a Honolulu blue, so extremely appropriate for Detroit. It almost looks like a sunny Detroit sky or the Lions uniform.
All right. Well, I'll take it, and I'm going to try it tonight. I'm very excited to try it tonight at the 1000th episode party. Though I will mention that with most people who listen to this, it will already have happened by the time you hear this. So we're not going to do a bunch of like mentions of it because the vast majority of people will have already been, and now you're on the back end. So there you go.
But you can go to congregation and get it yourself anytime.
All right, I've got some news, Devon.
We always do, Jared. What do you got?
You know how I love the East Side. I learned that there are going to be some significant changes over in the Jefferson Chalmers neighborhood. As we've talked about on the podcast before, there have been a ton of flooding issues over there, so much so that it is now a FEMA floodplain. And this has a lot of effects on residents, increasing their insurance. It also means that the area is not eligible for CDBG and other types of funding for projects. So something that was kind of a lingering issue, they put up those tiger dams, those big orange kind of water-filled dams to keep back the water. I know fighting water with water seems kind of interesting, but it works. Put up these tiger dams across so many people's yards and things like that. You can't miss them. They're big and orange. They're now working on a permanent fix, and I had access to a presentation where the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and officials from the city talked about kind of what's up ahead. And I can tell you, and I think you know this too, once the Army Corps of Engineers is involved, things are serious.
Yeah, Jared. I mean, this must be big. I get it's such a cool area. I mean, I'm like heartbroken to see it kind of change in a major way, but at the same time, I mean, you have to feel for the residents and the people who own homes there that just it's untenable now, much like the actual Venice that is continuing to sink and experiencing more flooding.
So according to the Army Corps, the issue isn't just the stormwater part, because, you know, we've talked about like the connections of the Great Lakes and the drainage and all that stuff, but the river is actually overtopping the seawall. And there is no way that the sewage system and all that can handle both stormwater and river water. I mean, that's just a huge push. And so something has to be done. And so it looks like the city is going to go with the permanent closure of Fox Creek and Phillip canals with a stop log feature across Lakewood Canal. There'd be seawall elements. This would be, officials said, the most cost effective and not involving having to purchase or acquire a bunch of land. You'd also see a levee go across A.B. Ford Park in this proposed look. Now, again, this is proposed. There were 3 different looks that the Army Corps of Engineers put together. City officials piped up and kind of shared what their preference was because of the issue of acquiring land and such. And so basically you would have a number of canals that would be blocked off, one that would provide access to the river, but it could be open and closed depending on your conditions, your river height. They're looking to get into the consultant phase and want construction to start in 2024. The goal of all this work is to get Jefferson Chalmers removed from that FEMA 100-year floodplain. It's still early. I know this presentation was near the end of last month. I went through it, kind of like got a vibe of what was going on, but it does seem like the administration is pretty like gung-ho with this one. And it's interesting that this one hasn't gotten much more play, and I don't think there's really hard cost numbers attached to this one yet either.
Yeah, Jared. I mean, this is a big development, and I agree with you, especially for the people in that neighborhood. But I'm wondering, I mean, just from a headline, and you've maybe seen more than me, just so listeners can understand if you've ever seen that canal area. So, what are we talking about, Jared? Are those canals literally going to become Fox Creek and Phillip become like inaccessible, or it'll just be able to be used by residents at given times when the levee is up or down or whatever? Or is it just you basically don't live on a canal anymore, or is it still accessible?
It'll still be a canal. The thing is that's hard about this is that these were all kind of created as part of like a development scheme. Like,
right.
One of these canals is natural. Some of the others were kind of dug out. And so with the changing climate and higher water levels, you've got to do something in order to kind of keep these basements dry. So I think that there is a fear that you're going to have less access because you're not going to be able to go, say, if you're on Fox, you're not going to be able to go straight into the river. You're going to have to like navigate around and do things. And I think there are some concerns and some things that the consultants need to look at on, is this going to make water more stagnant? Those kind of things. Like, I think there's still a lot of work to be done with this, but it is clear to me the city has like a plan in motion. If there's anything I know about this administration, once they pick a direction, they kind of like bulldoggedly stick to it.
That is true, Jer. for better or worse, once this administration decides they're going to do something, they do it. And I will say it's been by far majority good in my opinion. But they get things moving and they make it happen. So if this is determined to be the right fix and the right plan, they will go forward. And I think at the end of the day, they want to protect those residents' properties. They want to protect their quality of life. And it may suck in the short term, maybe for those people to have difficult access or less access to the canals, because probably that's why they bought the homes there. But ultimately, this is going to be better in the long run, I think.
Well, I think there's still some phases to go through this, right? I think there's going to still need to be some jostling with what happens, because you do have a lot of property owners there that's the reason that they bought. On the other hand, I will also say this work probably should have happened a quarter century ago. Like this whole area has been neglected for various reasons. And you can see the height of the seawall and the strength of the seawall on the Grosse Pointe side and how that whole area is not a floodplain. And so there's going to be a lot of places across the city that I think there's this like kind of major project things that are going to happen, because there was so much that just was left to rot, like just let go for years for budget, all kinds of other concerns. So, sir, you've managed to avoid this conversation for 2 weeks. And listeners will know what we're about to talk about, and that is our commentary on gas prices that overflowed our email inbox with comments.
Here I go, Jared. Should I put on my Darth Vader mask here for this segment?
So let's just jump into it, because I kind of divide up into a couple of thoughts, although the commentary in general was very much in one direction. So there were the simple comments, like from Aaron, who said, "Love you, Devon, but you're dead wrong on this one." Summed up about I would say 80% of the comments. And then I want to make sure to highlight Willie, who left a very thoughtful commentary. For audio purposes, I'm going to boil it down. It was, a couple of pages. And I'm just going to quote, "You making comments about how 50 cents a gallon is not a big deal, and it only being $5 extra fill up and just a cup of coffee is extremely tone deaf and dismissive of struggles people face in the state. 20% live below the poverty line in Wayne County, 13% in the entire state. They probably can't afford an extra cup of coffee at the pump, especially considering all the other things that you mentioned on the show." Willie also didn't like how I, myself, didn't push back harder on you. So I'll give you the floor first, Evan. I figured this was among the most thoughtful, and this one to directly respond to.
Yeah, no, exactly. We appreciate feedback, and Willie certainly makes valid points, and I appreciate his feedback and his critique. It does not change my opinion at all. It doesn't change my viewpoint at all on this. I think that, the idea that, bringing up the idea of how many 20% of residents live below the poverty line, bringing up poverty and the immense issue that poverty is in this state is kind of a whataboutism here. We're losing it. This isn't about gas then. There are some serious systematic poverty issues in the city of Detroit and the surrounding areas. And the fact that someone, is having trouble putting food on the table, the fact that someone is having trouble, affording just basic needs, that's not necessarily, that's a bigger issue than just the price of gas. We're talking about bigger stuff here. And so I still say overall, the gas then is not the issue. That's a poverty issue, and that's something that needs to be addressed. Absolutely. But to me, they are not things that can just be tied together. The price of gas going up, people are still driving, Jer. Look at it. The reason why gas is still going up,
the demand is not down at all.
Demand is not down. People are still driving. They don't care. So I guess, I'm sorry, my pushback would be, look at what's happening. The data says that people actually don't really care. They like to complain about the price of gas, but they don't give two craps because they're still driving just as much, if not more than they were before.
So I'll push back on that one and say maybe they do care, but they don't have a choice. And this lines into his criticism of me, and I'll defend myself here. I probably didn't push back harder because I think subsidized sprawl is a terrible way to build communities. It doesn't mean I hate the suburbs. I don't hate all suburbs. Don't get that. Don't get that messed. But I didn't push back because at the end of the day, Metro Detroit is built in an unsustainable way. When I have so many listeners saying that it's 20, 30, 40 minutes between things, that isn't a city. That's a rural area, right? Like for me, everything I need is within 10 minutes. And that's part of living in a city. And anywhere you live where there's a lot of people, like in Metro Detroit, we've got this weird middle ground where it's like we think and act like a city Or in Metro Detroit, we act like an urban area, but we design things in a rural way. And we keep building new stuff without adding people. And as long as we keep doing that, we're going to keep having this issue. Now, I have a lot of sympathy for those who grew up in this system and think this is the only way to go. And this is the best way to go, but it is not the best way to design a community. And long term, it's not sustainable. Why do you think we have all these infrastructure issues? Because we are pulled apart so far apart. It makes no sense that we're hyper building. One of the fastest communities is like Macomb Township, or we're turning farmland into these suburban areas. Meanwhile, we have huge sections of our city and our region that need investment. So the reason I didn't push back harder, eventually this was going to come home to roost. Eventually this was a ticking time bomb, and it hit now, and it's terrible that it hit now, and it sucks individually. And I feel for that. And we need to do programs to try to figure this out. And I don't know if this is going to be the wake up call, because I think we're so culturally used to how things are. But the reason I didn't push back harder is because the way that we're doing things isn't sustainable. I mean,
One, I appreciate you saying that, because I completely agree. And I guess that could be another take that could get you or I some feedback. But if you live 20 or 30 minutes away from the closest like grocery store, cafe, restaurant, gas station, I don't know, maybe this is a bad take, but like you need to think about that. Like, maybe you need to think about where you decided to live if you live that far from any of those things.
You're not living in an urban area at that point.
Right.
To me, it's something where you can't, the hard part is that people move to different parts of this region, and then they go to an area, develop it, and then wonder why all the services aren't there, and then drag all the services out there. Now, that would be fine if we were growing, but we're not. And so everything kind of just like slides around. When I say growing, I mean by population. We're basically flatlined for the last 50 years.
Right. We're just shuffling around.
We need to get more people moved in. This is why I'm pro-immigration. You want to see areas that are seeing things get built and happening? Look down the road from me in Hamtramck, one of the fastest growing areas in this entire region, and also one of the most population dense. I ran a map, and the most population dense areas, you've got some areas over by Dearborn, where you are. You've got the Woodward Corridor south of Birmingham, not Birmingham, but south of Birmingham. And then you have the Grosse Pointes. And the Grosse Pointes are halfway to as dense as being Chicago. But the rest of this, I mean, there's huge sections of our region, they're not empty, but they don't have enough people for lots of services, and they stretch things across. So no wonder we always are running these issues.
And that means that you got to drive a lot, and you got to use a lot, and you got to use a lot of gas. So,
and the gas companies, the oil companies, they know this. They know we don't have options. So they're going to keep turning up the dial. Like every expert I tells me, like, we're going to hit 6. What else are you going to do? And that's where I feel the sympathy. It's not that they choose to, it's that they have to drive to work. They have to do these things, and there are no other options for them.
Right.
And that sucks, and we need to do better by them. We also need to keep an eye to the long term so this doesn't happen to us again.
Gotta stop talking in the mirror. God, I don't even wanna be her. Gotta start clearing up the picture.
Before we let you go, let's do something fun. A fun idea. Representatives Rodney Wakeman and John Cherry are working to write up safety guidelines for swim-up bars. Now, I didn't realize, Devon, that they weren't legal in Michigan. I just thought we didn't have any. What do you think of the swim-up bar?
I think you know what I think of the swim-up bar. Jer, it sounds like a great idea. I've been to some of these on vacations in warmer weather climates. But why not? I feel like I was talking to somebody who's a listener who I know pretty well. I won't say his name, but he basically was saying, there's so many archaic laws still on the books in Michigan, and it's in terms to liquor consumption that go back to like Prohibition days, and they're just like these dusty old laws that are still sitting there, and it's like no one has looked at them in decades to say, does this even make sense anymore? Like why can't we have a swim up bar? So I think all of these laws like this need to be relooked at, and then. We saw in the pandemic the kind of takeaway drinks and on the roadies and stuff like that. That was all great. It was a boon. It got business there. So stuff like this, I think, is fantastic. The timing is right. The beginning of summer. So I hope to be able to hit a swim up bar in the Detroit area this summer.
And to people who think this isn't a good idea, I'm curious if you don't think it's a good idea. dailydetroit@gmail.com. But I mean, here in Michigan, we do have the tradition of Jobby Nooner, and there is no pool that will be dirtier than the water of Jobby Nooner in the middle of that group. So
damn right about that, Jared.
All right, friends, we are done for today. Thank you so much for listening. I appreciate you so very much. If you could, consider leaving 5 stars on Apple Podcast or Spotify. It's a great way to tell people about the show. Well, with that, I'm Jer Stays.
And I'm Devon O'Reilly.
Take care of each other. Remember that you are somebody, and we'll see you around Detroit.